Well, hello, hello, hello. As you can see, I am all alone today. The great Mark Pellegrino is celebrating his birthday, so he won't be joining us, but feel free to wish him a happy birthday. I'm quite sure he'd appreciate it. So, all you have today is me, the wonderful, the great, the fantastic Michael Liebowitz, host of the Rational Egoist podcast, which you should be watching if you aren't already. Also, the vice chair of the American Capitalist Party. So, I've got a number of topics to discuss today. But first, I want to address something, and it's actually interesting because Robert Nasser has asked in the chat, now that Trump has simply floated idea of deporting U.S. citizens, is there any room for honest disagreement about the present administration and its leader? The my main problem, I have a lot of problems with Donald Trump, but my main problem, and I don't know if this is what Robert was referring to, but it's what it reminds me of, a far bigger danger to America and the world than Donald Trump are the people who defend him, the people who just fall in line for whatever he does, that twist their minds into pretzels to back him up, to be loyal to him, because loyalty to the leader is all that matters. One such person is this dick, Gunther Eagleman. He is a one-man sycophant explosion on X all day long. He just posts about how wonderful Trump is. So yesterday he made a post that said, anything Trump does, the Democrats, what won't the Democrats oppose if Trump supports it? Basically saying that they will oppose whatever Trump does. And I said, okay, that's a fair point, but how many MAGA have gone out of their way to defend Trump, even when he says ridiculous things or asks ridiculous questions? And the example I gave was when he asked if it was a possibility to inject disinfectant to cure COVID. And true to form, the MAGA defenders came out and said, no, that's a hoax. He didn't say that. So I posted a video where Trump said exactly that. The claim was, no, that's an edited video. Okay, I went and got the transcript and I posted that. Then the response was, no, 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 he was only talking about UV light. But in the video, he's discussing UV light and then he says, then there's the disinfectant. It's a clear pivot to disinfectant. Still, they defend him. Nope, it's a hoax. They accused me, one of them, I was the one being dishonest. Okay. So I went in, I looked into it a little further, and I saw what Trump's response was when he was asked about it. And what he said was, oh, I was just being sarcastic. In other words, Trump's defense of himself wasn't that he didn't say it, wasn't that it wasn't referring to disinfectant, it was that it was sarcastic, he didn't mean it. So the Trump defenders offered up a defense that Trump himself never offered. Such is the desire to absolve him of every stupid thing that he says. So I posted about this today on both X and Facebook, and true to form, a Trumpster shows up and he wants to start talking to me about the media is dishonest, how Trump never said drink bleach, which of course I never said he did. I said he asked a question about injecting disinfectant. My point here is the epistemological mess that even those of us who are honest and rational, if not mistaken at times, have when dealing with the MAGA movement. Either they are dishonest or their minds are just so warped that a real discussion can't even take place. And I really don't know the solution to this. I've been struggling with it since he first came on the scene, when I would argue with friends of mine about him who they would deny what he said. I would put on Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and they would say, no, it's the media and the elites are just after him about things that I heard myself or, saw with my own eyes. So I don't know. It's a mess. So when Robert asks, can we have any honest disagreement about this president administration, I don't think we can have any rational disagreement. I don't know about honest, because I'm loath to accuse people of dishonesty unless I can prove it, because they might just be brainwashed. I ultimately don't know. But we certainly can't have a discussion where one side is resorting to evidence, logic, reason, facts, and the other side just says, no, the media is corrupt, or no, Trump didn't do what we all know he did. So that's the spot that we're in when it comes to one Donald John Trump. And it's a sad state of affairs. And unfortunately, we have a mainstream or corporate or legacy media, or whatever the terminology is these days, that has proven itself for quite some time to be biased, to not be an honest broker. So rightfully, people distrust them. And what's come along, the right-wing information sphere, is bad, or just as bad or worse with their dishonesty. So we're in a bad spot, and hopefully shows like this one here can fill that gap to bring honest discourse. Not that we'll never be wrong or never make a mistake. Of course that's possible, but we'll correct it, we'll admit it, and move on. But we'll always bring our best and always be honest with what we're bringing. So a few shows back, my illustrious co-host mentioned how at times sweatshops are actually a good thing. He subsequently took some flack for that, because, well, people aren't too praiseworthy. They don't like to praise sweatshops. But interestingly, today I was scanning through my normal sources of information, and one of them is the Foundation for Economic Education. And they have an article. They often put in articles from their archives by Brittany Hunter. And Brittany Hunter wrote an article called Sweatshops and Human Rights. And it's a very good read. So if anybody wants to go and check it out, I'd highly recommend it. But ultimately, what her point is that we cannot judge developing countries by American standards, by the American standard of living. That the people in these countries are taking these jobs because they're better off with them than without them. That their wages, for instance, are determined by the same forces as they are anywhere else, by supply and demand. People demand these jobs because they have nothing better, and because the demand for the job, for people to work, is higher than the demand to hire them than it would be, maybe somewhere else, the cost of labor is low, but they're still better off. So that, I think, is important to keep in mind. And the author of this article, Brittany Hunter, also points out that if you attempt to mess around with that, if you, for instance, increase the minimum wage in those countries, what you're going to do is cause those people to be unemployed. Again, they will be worse off than they were had they not had these jobs available. And the same goes for the working conditions. When I look at those working conditions, say in Bangladesh, which is a place that she cites, or China, I don't want to work in those conditions, but I'm used to something far different, and my options are better. If your options are not better, that's what you're going to take. And if you try to force companies, and this is not a moral defense of the companies involved, for whatever reason, this is the employment characteristics, that the job environment that they're providing. But if you try to force them to go by the standards of modern America, they're just going to remove their companies from these countries, again, leaving the people in those countries worse off. It's not a good thing. But even then, part of the problem is these countries are undeveloped. They simply don't have the capital formation to provide the type of things in America that we have. Remember, we went through an industrial revolution. We've had capitalism here, or elements of capitalism here, for far longer than what these countries have had. we can afford, although there are market distortions with the regulations that we have and minimum wages, nonetheless, we've already got the capital accumulation where we can withstand that type of government onslaught where these countries cannot. She even references the child labor issue. And there was a situation in Bangladesh where I think it was 50 kids. The factories were forced to let them go. They couldn't be employed in the factories. Well, when that happened, these kids didn't end up in school. They ended up working in worse off conditions than they had in the factory. And ultimately, this was Mark's point. Not that these things are good in an absolute sense, devoid of context, but that when we judge, whether it be people, a situation, whatever, we always have to hold the context. The context in many of these cases is that these countries are abysmal and they're in the beginnings of capitalism. We cannot expect them to live up to our living standards. It's just not realistic. It's not going to happen. So there's a comment here from Bonnie Bertrand in relation to the Donald Trump discussion earlier, and she says it's not the bleach / disinfectant. It's that a man in power muses in public like that. That he was slightly sarcastic and thought that was okay. I happen to agree with you, Bonnie. I don't know that he was being sarcastic. He claims he was. When I listened to it, it certainly didn't seem so. But the idea that that is a defense is ridiculous. And we had this recently where he said something, and now I don't remember what it was, but it was claimed, no, he's just trolling the media, as if that is appropriate behavior for the President of the United States. Of course, it is not appropriate behavior for the President of the United States. So with the tariffs that are being put on, and more when they went into effect today, I think 104% 104% tariff on China. Some products, the prices of them are going to go up, and people in anticipation of that are trying to preempt it and go buy products, which is prudent to an extent. But what ends up happening is reminiscent of what economists call the flight to real goods. And the flight to real goods occurs when, during an inflationary period, people begin to realize that the money is useless and getting more and more useless. So what they do is they want to go buy things immediately, get rid of their money, get real assets, more products, real stuff, tangible things that they can use. But in their rush to do so, they accelerate the price increases. And I'm just wondering how much that effect is going to take place now. If there's anybody versed in economics that's listening and they want to comment in the comment section, that'd be great, because it seems to me that what's going to happen as people rush to buy the new goods, to exchange their cash to buy things that are, the anticipation is that they're going to be more expensive, they're going to drive up the prices, and we're going to get higher prices for those goods. Of course, Trump is, I believe, counting on the Federal Reserve then to lower interest rates so that people have more cash on hand, but that of course will just make the dollar weaker and cause prices to go up a little bit more. We have here Greg Doherty says the hubris of central planners is really muted by mere empirical evidence. It is, unfortunately, when you have either dishonest brokers or brainwashed brokers or interlocutors, as the case may be, it doesn't matter. The evidence doesn't matter. When the other day, when the stock market had been going down for a few days, they said, oh, that doesn't matter. The stock market's not the economy. Don't worry about it. But then when there were signs that the stock market was going up, I saw these MAGA influencers all over X bragging, oh, the media is silent now. Of course, they counted their chickens before they hatched, and the market ended up going down anyways. The point is that when they get what they think is good news, they brag about it. When the news is bad, they disregard it. And all we can hope for is that there are rational people out there that are paying attention, maybe people on the margins who are going to change their view, change their vote, and hopefully we can get more rational people in office. Greg Lewis says a move toward the rational, the better, is better than compromises that move away from a more rational, better situation. I agree. I believe he's referring to the sweatshop discussion from a few moments ago, and I agree with you. To cite somebody that I disagree with often, but on this point I agree with him. Murray Rothbard talked about how we should always move toward greater freedom. Any policy that takes us in a direction of greater freedom or takes us toward a better society is a good one. So that, and I believe it was Grover Norquist who said that he'll accept any compromise that leads to a greater freedom of the American people. And I agree wholeheartedly. Ashley Shrugged says, Ein discusses this in Philosophy, Who Needs It. Unfortunately, Ashley, I don't know what you're referencing. So if you can tell me what she discusses in Philosophy, Who Needs It, and perhaps name the given essay, that would be great. And then we can maybe have a little discussion about that. That would be wonderful. So how many of you have heard the defense of the tariffs come out and say, well, it's going to be temporary pain, but we're going to have a realignment and it's going to be wonderful afterwards, or you have to go through some pain to get there. And there's people on the left I see are up in arms about that. I'm actually not. I actually don't think that it's a bad argument on its own when you say we're going to have to go through some pain to experience growth, because I think it's true. It's true on an individual level, and it's true on a societal level, that when you are damaged or broken or have weaknesses and you want to grow, you're going to suffer some pain. So I think that if we were to begin to implement the type of society that I would like to live in, that I think most of you would like to live in, I think there would be pain. As you move away from monetary expansion, as you move away from things like public education, like we addressed yesterday, even if you do it incrementally, you're going to experience pain. What's wrong with the tariffs isn't that they're going to cause temporary pain. What's wrong with the tariffs is that they're a gross rights violation. They're an initiation of force, that they're not what their advocates claim, attacks on other countries. They're attacks on American importers that will ultimately be passed on to consumers. And they are not going to lead to the results that the advocates say. That is the problem with them. It's not that there's going to be temporary pain that we're going to experience. It's that they are a horrid rights violating policy that's going to lead to results that even its advocates say they don't want. Whether they do or not, I really don't know. Ashley Shrug clarifies. She says that Ein talks about the rush to real goods in chapter 12, she believes. I don't remember what chapter 12 is. It's been some years before I read Philosophy, Who Needs It. Bonnie Bertrand says, can we all say stolen concept? Tariffs are force and nothing but force. Well, that's exactly right, Bonnie. You are correct. They are force. They're not a tax cut, as Peter Navarro, I believe, recently said. Speaking of Peter Navarro, has anybody seen the dust up he's having with Elon Musk in the very public, where Elon Musk says Peter Navarro is dumber than a bag of bricks or a sack of bricks or some such thing? The problem is, again, when somebody like Elon says that, and Elon, I guess, is pro-free trade or pro-freer trade, is he hasn't demonstrated himself to be a principled advocate of anything. So while in this specific instance, I happen to agree with him on free trade, and I happen to agree with him that Peter Navarro is dumber than a bag of bricks, it doesn't really do any good, because I don't know where he's going to be on the next issue, because he's haphazard in his approach. You just don't know what he's going to do, what he's going to say. And that's dangerous. It's almost better to just have somebody that says, how do I put this? When you have somebody that is explicit, principled, but opposes you, like, for instance, a Marxist, I always know where the Marxist is going to be. I don't have to guess from day to day. There's no question of him being my ally. We know he's my enemy. No one's going to accuse him for my friend. But in the case of an Elon Musk, people will make that confusion. They will think he's a capitalist. They will think Trump is a capitalist, and that is a very dangerous thing. Bonnie Bertrand says the pain is necessary is the stolen concept. Maybe. I don't know. I'd have to give it some thought because the pain is necessary as a proposition. I don't know that it's a stolen concept because it's not a concept on its own, Bonnie. But you might be right. I don't know. I'd have to give it some thought. I think it's definitely in this case an inaccurate portrayal of what is occurring. There's no doubt about that. I just don't know that it fits the actual definition of a stolen concept. Perhaps a better epistemologist than me can explain it. If Jim Valiant is in the audience, or even Greg Lewis, I think may be able to talk about that. I don't know if Robert Nasser is still here, but he could probably address that as well. Something else I wanted to run by you. This Martin Gurry in the Free Press wrote an article about when Americans gave up on freedom or when we gave up our freedom. And he echoed something that I frequently hear. His claim is that we gave up our freedoms during COVID, that we gave in to the lockdowns. That's when we gave in on our freedoms. And I think it's true that the lockdowns were a gross violation of rights, that they were an assault on individual liberty, they're a vast government overreach. I agree with all that. But I've heard people say this is the greatest rights violation in American history, or things of that nature. And I just don't know where that comes from. I mean, we've been giving up our freedoms since the beginning. I mean, since the beginning, with the advent of the national bank, with the American system. Of course, we had slavery in the South. So there were always people making inroads on liberty and government making inroads on liberty. I mean, Thomas Jefferson said that the natural course of events is for government to increase and liberty to decrease. And I think that we've largely proved him right. And he said it takes eternal vigilance to fight for freedom. And I think he was right then, too. The problem is I don't think that the American citizenry has shown that eternal vigilance in order to fight for freedom. So the idea that we just suddenly gave up our freedoms with COVID, I mean, that just ignores so much. It ignores the income tax. It ignores the New Deal. It ignores the Great Society. And it ignores the war on drugs. And, people abhor drugs, and rightfully so. They can wreak havoc on a person's life, on families. That doesn't mean the war on drugs hasn't been an assault on liberty. The war on drugs separates people from their right to make choices, and it puts the government in place. The government is going to decide what's good for people, what's best for people, what people should be allowed to put into their bodies. But the effects, because somebody told me the other day, a few people, professed objectivists, I don't know if they are or not, that's why I say professed, I'm not casting aspersions or anything like that, but what they said was that no, drugs are bad, liberty is good, and they took that away for COVID. So that's worse than the violations of rights that take place in the war on drugs. But the war on drugs is far more than just telling dealers and addicts what they can and can't do. It necessarily leads to policies that violate rights. Illegal searches and seizures, for instance, the ratings of homes that take place, the arrests of people caught up in drug nets who have nothing to do with that. I know people who have been in houses where the owners of the house happen to be selling drugs. The people don't know it. They're there, but they get arrested when the house gets raided anyway. Never mind the taxes to pay to put all the people in prison because of the war on drugs. And what about the fact that it artificially drives up the price and people end up stealing to support it? What about the people whose rights are violated, who are having their stuff stolen due to the war on drugs? What about the gang wars that inevitably result from these things, as they did with Prohibition, and the innocent victims of the gang wars, people that get shot and killed who have nothing to do with these things? So Ashley shrugged, is referencing South Park. She says drugs are bad. Okay, Mr. Mackey, of course, from South Park, said that. So I just disagree wholeheartedly with the idea that suddenly in the last 5 years America has been going south on the idea of individual liberty and individual freedom. It's something that has been taking place for quite some time, and unless we have a drastic reversal, there's no sign to me that it's stopping. It's certainly not stopping with the Trump administration. It certainly would not have stopped with either a Biden or a Harris administration. There's simply too many people that either don't understand what freedom is or just don't care about it. Bonnie Bertrand says they're using the effort necessary to achieve goals as pain. So if you're suffering from tariff, that just means we're making an effort to reach a goal and ignores the nature of the tariffs. Oh, I agree with you there. Greg Lewis says the pain is necessary, and it's in quotes, is equating it to, say, a trip to the dentist, perhaps part of a package deal selling point. Well, that's a good point as well. It's certainly BS, right? It's definitely BS. We are definitely not going through pain necessary to achieve a better result, as is intimated by the people who make that claim. So what do you guys think about the monarchy in Great Britain? This is, I don't know, it doesn't affect us as Americans, unless there's some people out there who aren't Americans, but still I find it interesting that there are still monarchies in the world. I mean, I understand that the monarchy in Great Britain is mostly just for show. They don't have any power, but it's still a monarchy, and it's still supported by British tax dollars. I mean, they support quite a lavish lifestyle for these people. And in the news, there was a story about Prince Harry, and Prince Harry is suing because he says that they're not, let me make sure I get this right so I don't misstate what's happening. Let me make sure. It says here, Prince Harry appeared at England's Court of Appeal yesterday to challenge the reduction of his taxpayer-funded security. So he wants security, and he wants the taxpayers to pay for it. Well, obviously, I disagree with the idea of taxation to begin with, the initiation of force to violate the rights of citizens and take their money to finance things that they haven't agreed to. But it's especially, to me, gross when it's to uphold a monarchy. I mean, monarchies are relics. They should have been gone long ago, but they are still here. And, just to have people paying to fund them, forcing to be funded. Here's the thing. It's argued in Race Jacobson says here, the British monarchy is more of a cultural relic than anything, which I agree. He says those Brits love their history. It's almost a national fetish. Well, here's the problem, and I think that a lot of Brits do love the monarchy, and that's why they have it, but I don't think everybody's for it. If it's such a popular thing, right, if they are so loved by the people, why not then just let people fund them voluntarily? Have a fund, and if people want to put money in it to support the monarchy, they can. The fact that it's dependent on force tells me that, well, then not enough people really want this. If people really wanted it, then they would pay for it, right? They wouldn't need to be compelled at the point of the metaphorical gun to pay for it. So, I mean, I guess people can say, well, I'm not British, it doesn't affect me. True. But I think that wherever people aren't free, it ultimately affects me. As I said yesterday, I'm for freedom, and I'm not just for freedom who happen to be born in the same geographical area that I've been born in. I'm for freedom for everybody, which is why when it comes to issues like immigration, I am for open borders. I think that those people have as much right to a job, as much right to freedom of movement as anybody that happened to be born here in this country. And that's all there is to it. So I do think that if the Brits don't, here, let me see. I was going to say, if the Brits really want this, they'd pay for it. If they don't want it, then they should be able to get rid of it. And thus, it should be a voluntarily funded thing. The wonderful Jim Valiant, my great friend, says, the descendants of thugs are a poor tribal symbol, and looting is their tradition. Well, maybe so, Jim, but the descendants of thugs. Oh, I think he's talking about the kings and queens. My fault. I was going to disagree with you, but I agree, Jim, that they are upholding it. They are still being financed by it. So while they may be proper in their speech and clothing, I would say they are thugs as well. They're being supported by thugs. They're advocating thuggery. And Ashley Shrugged says Diana to Kamala to Camilla is the biggest downgrade ever. And then Ray's Jacobson says the more things change, the more they stay the same. The monarchy always siphoned value. The peasantry like parasites clad in gold. Okay, Race, that's nice. Jim Valiant, let me just say, Jim Valiant's in the audience. Let me send out a nice shout out to him. He's a regular guest on my podcast, The Rational Egoist. He is wonderful, and he is an absolute, just a encyclopedia. If you want information, you go to Jim Valiant. I went to hang out with him in San Diego, and everywhere we went, he knew everything about everything. He knew the history of the trees. He knew when the trees were imported. I think there was it bamboo, Jim? Let me know. I think there was bamboo, and he said, yeah, that was brought in. No, eucalyptus trees. He told me when they were brought in. I think they were brought in for a world fair, and then they ended up just spreading, and so now they're an actual part of San Diego. Jim is absolutely wonderful. He can go enlist the entire history of the British monarchy going back to at least William the Conqueror in 1066. So if you ever want to just have the British history of the monarchy relayed to you, ask Jim to do it. I know, I don't know. I'm very confident, though, that he would love to do it. Bonnie Bertrand says, the Queen was a nice bridge between the old and new. She was a perfect successor in time of war, but it would have been great to have phased the monarchy out if they had a better parliament. That's a big if, yes. I mean, the Brits, Jim Valiant says, thank you. You're very, very welcome, my brother. I love you. After the war, the Brits, they just went further and further into socialism, of course, until, Maggie Thatcher came along. But I'm just, all around the world, it just seems there's no ray of light. There's no ray of hope that freedom can come forward. But the people listening to this, I think, are that ray of hope. I think we all are reminiscent of what Albert J. Nock referred to as the remnant, the people that would light the flame of liberty for when everything crashed around, that they would lead the charge for a renewal of liberty. And I think that's what we are. And I think that's a great, great thing. Well, I've been running my mouth now for 32 minutes and 36 seconds now, and I'm kind of running out of things to say. So what I'm going to do now is give a capitalist thought of the day. And if there's any further questions in the chat, I'd be happy to answer them. Or if there's any questions about my capitalist thought of the day, you can feel free to share them as well. My capitalist thought of the day is that government is never or very rarely the solution to the perceived inadequacies of the capitalist system. I'm hearkening back to the sweatshop discussion of earlier, that because we see things that we may not like in society, that does not mean that government is the answer. Usually the free market is the answer. Usually friends, family, individual freedom is the answer. That's what we need. That's what we're fighting for. And that's what we will continue to fight for. So are there any questions in the chat? Anybody? I just dropped my chapstick. That was the noise you heard. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So let me just tell you that we will be here tomorrow. I anticipate Mark being here with me tomorrow. Greg Doherty is recommending Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. I agree wholeheartedly. I once had a friend tell me that was the single book that would convert people to liberty. I don't know that it's that powerful, but it certainly is a powerful book, and it's very easy to read and comprehend. So I will be back here tomorrow. We will be discussing all things capitalism, all things freedom. Remember, you can see me on the Rational Egoist podcast, doing interviews, doing debates occasionally. I think we have very good discussions. And also check us out at the American Capitalist Party. It's theamericancapitalistparty.com. Go there, check us out. We're going to grow and we're going to make a difference. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you tomorrow.